I call to order the City of Bloomington Board
Recording in progress.
Sorry.
That's okay. The City of Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals for November the 18th, 2021. Roll call, please.
Clapper.
Here.
Coyne.
Here.
Burrell.
Here.
Rockmore.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. We have no minutes for approval this evening. Are there any reports, resolutions, and communications?
No, staff does not have any. Thank you.
Okay. We have one petition that is continued to the December meeting. That's AA-20-21, Sheila and Chris Calloway. And this evening we have on the docket one petition V-21-21 Norfolk Holdings LLC. Can we please have the staff report?
Sure thing. Just one moment. Can everyone see my screen? Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Keegan Gulick, zoning. This is for the property located at 1600 West 3rd Street on the northwest corner of Patterson and 3rd. The property is approximately 1.5 acres in size, currently zoned mixed-use medium scale. It's in the Urban Corridor Comprehensive Plan District. Its existing use is it's currently vacant with a vacant commercial structure. The proposed land use is a restaurant. They're proposing a Sonic restaurant. To the north, we have a church. To the south, multifamily dwelling units. To the east is a vacant lot, and then to the west is a dental office. So the petitioner is requesting a variance to allow for vehicle parking spaces in excess of the maximum parking allowance. They're requesting 7 parking spaces in excess of the maximum that are allowed. So just to briefly go over this, the restaurant uses are allowed 10 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area for indoor seating, 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area of outdoor seating. So this proposed restaurant would be allowed 20 parking spaces, and they're proposing 27 parking spaces. So just take a look at their site plan. Since this is a Sonic, they have spaces that are drive-in spaces where customers stay in their car and eat and dine in their vehicle, so they don't actually go into the restaurant. Several of the spaces are underneath a canopy structure. Looking at the criteria for approval, no injury is found with the allowance of additional parking spaces to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. No adverse impacts to the use and value of the surrounding with the proposed variance. We don't expect additional parking spaces to have any offsite negative consequences. For the strict application of the UDO, we do not find that there's any practical difficulty in the use of the property. A compliant parking lot with the required maximum number of spaces could be constructed on this site. And we don't believe that the petitioner has supplied sufficient data to indicate that there is a practical difficulty in the use of the site that the variance is a necessary relief to. They could construct a business on this site with the required maximum, that there's no unique condition on the site that would require more parking. So based on that, the department recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopts the proposed findings and denies V-21-21. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Keegan. Is the petitioner here?
Keegan, is that Jacob or Daniel? Do you know?
I believe Daniel. I'm not sure who would be speaking.
If one of you could message me if you're the petitioner, or you can press to raise your hand so I can unmute you, that would be great. You think Daniel, you said? Oh, it's Jacob. Just
okay.
There
we go.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Jacob. Thank you.
Okay, Jacob.
No
Could
problem.
you, hello, good evening. Could you please state your name?
Yes, my name is Jacob Stauffer.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have up to 20 minutes to present your petition.
Thank you. I don't think I'll take that long. Thank you for your time. Our request is to build a Sonic drive-in. We're requesting 27 stalls, and we believe the unique nature of our business is such that it doesn't the strict enforcement of your code as it's written will place us at a competitive disadvantage. We use a small building, a very efficient small building, to serve a relatively high number of customers. For example, we'll do approximately $3 million in sales out of this facility, which is close to the Culver's or the McDonald's that are both to the west of this facility. Both of those facilities have much larger buildings, and they have each about 40 parking stalls. So you're going to have a similar sales volume done through a building about a third the size of their buildings. The difference is that we're counting, and I don't know how familiar you are with the Sonic business model, but we have actual pull-in stalls with menu boards at the stalls. So the stalls themselves, rather than being under roof, which would allow for more parking stalls, are counting as parking stalls. So you have two uses of parking stalls, both of which are counting in the same manner against your code cap. So we have 14 stalls that have menu boards that are under an awning. And then we're proposing 13 additional parks for crew parking and patio parking. So that, which is 27. Like I said, we're projecting based on our data, and I have 55 stores, 55 Sonic stores. So based on our data, this store will do about 600 customers a day on average. Our high hours will be between 100 and 120 customers per hour. Assuming we consume 10 of the parking stalls with crew, that's going to leave us in the high hour having basically to turn each parking stall 12 times in that hour if we're held to this strict adherence, which is candidly not possible. You're going to have people that are going to take longer than 5 minutes to order, get their food and eat. So if you hold them to a 5-minute turn per stall ratio, it puts us at a massive competitive disadvantage to similarly situated properties to the west of us. In the property itself, it's 1.7 acres. So there's nothing on the actual real property itself that limits constructing more parking stalls. I could easily I could subdivide it and do 2 of these and get at that point 40 parking stalls, but I'd have to build 2 buildings to do so. Or I could, I guess, under your code, bump the building up to 2,001 feet, and then that would get me my 30 stalls. But both of those are an inefficient use of capital and just make no sense because there's no there's no harm to anyone for the granting of this variance. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but like I said, for us to operate our business as it stands and use the type of efficient capital structure we use, it makes sense for us to have a slightly higher ratio of parking to building size than what you would find in a traditional dine-in restaurant.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. We are to the board for questions of the petitioner staff.
Hi, this is Eric Coyne.
Yes.
A quick question. Can someone show me on the map of the facility, like where are all these, there's a ton of diagonal lines. Which ones are parking places and which ones are just, pointing around? Thanks.
Yeah, so yeah, I think you can kind of see there's this dashed line, I believe is the canopy that was referenced. And so the petitioner can correct me if I'm wrong, but
no, that's correct. And if the dashed lines, the angular lines that have kind of a broader area at the base of them, those are representing the menu order boards. So those would be ordering stalls. And then the lines at the same slant that don't have that broader line would just be traditional parking spots.
Eric, do you have any further questions?
Not about the design. See if
Okay.
anyone else has any questions.
Okay. Anyone
Thanks.
else? Joe, did you have some questions?
I just have one for staff. Maybe Jackie can answer this, but it sounds like it was asserted in the presentation from the petitioner that we should provide relief, granting a variance in order to help them have a competitive, to not be at a competitive disadvantage. Is it the purview of this board that it's our responsibility to try to help a business achieve some kind of a competitive equality as part of our deliberations? I'm just curious.
No, I would say, you know, your purview is to decide whether or not the property and use in conjunction with that is has practical difficulties for use. No, I would not say that's a typical purview.
So the economics of the issue, just to be clear, is what we're looking at.
Yeah,
we're looking at the code, only at the code. Okay, thank you.
So I have a question. Flavia, did you have anything? Do you have any questions? Please.
So my question is, so those parking spaces under a canopy, they are temporary parking, correct? Where people order their food, eat and leave?
That is correct.
The parking that does not have the canopy on top, which is the lines across, so they would be parking where people would buy the food and still eat there? Or is it just for the employees?
The vast majority of those will be occupied by employees. Traditionally, we do about 5 to 10% of our sales on the patio, depending on weather. And so that those stalls are not used heavily by customers themselves.
Are there customers that just come? I mean, when you say patio, where is the patio in the?
So if you look up against 3rd Street, there's another canopy up there that will have outdoor furniture and a nice.
So a client potentially can park, pick up the food, and sit in the patio, have lunch.
Yes, they can. Again, though, I'll have 12 crew at a high hour working in the store. And so assuming they all drive separately, that they're going to occupy, there's 13 parks, they would occupy the vast majority of the parking stalls.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions. Mr. Stauffer, so do I understand correctly that there is no inside dining?
That is correct.
Okay. And is there a Sonic in Bloomington currently?
There is not.
Okay. I was just curious about that. And then for the staff, so essentially this business model of a restaurant isn't really addressed by our parking ordinance in any particular manner. This is kind of a little unusual business model in terms of how we define parking.
Right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Keegan.
Oh, no. Yeah, I think that's accurate. You know, we would just consider it a restaurant just as any other restaurant, and the parking spaces or dine-in spaces, we would just consider to be parking spaces.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, this question is for staff again. The outdoor, the 20 spaces were determined based on the size of the restaurant. So if they were to expand the space on the outdoor dining that's available, the patio, would they be able to increase it? If they were to increase it, would they be then in turn given under code the right to have more parking spaces?
Yeah, they get 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of outdoor dining. So if they did increase either the building or the outdoor square footage, then they would get more parking spaces.
So if I understand it correctly, then based on what we're looking at, the petitioner has said that there's plenty of property there and that he could build 2 stores. So the reality is that he could achieve his goals of this petition simply by expanding the space, be within code, everyone would be happy. There'd be no variance needed. That was for
Sure.
staff. Is that accurate? Is that an accurate statement?
Sure. Yeah, I would say so. If the building was larger, they would be allowed more parking spaces.
Or if
no,
not
the building itself, but the outdoor dining. If they were to expand the outdoor dining, because it's my understanding from the petitioner that there's plenty of property there on that land, they were able to expand that. They could get the number of spaces they needed.
Yes, I would say that's accurate.
And therefore be well within compliance. Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
I have a follow-up on that. How is an outdoor dining area defined? I mean, right now they have a covered area. It doesn't necessarily need to be covered, would it?
That's a good question. I'll have to check if the code defines that. I don't know if Jackie, if you know off the top of your head.
Yeah, we can double check, but I don't believe so. So if the code doesn't define something specifically, then it goes to your typical meaning. So outdoor area would not, if it isn't defined, which I don't believe it is, we'll double check right now, then no, it would not necessarily have to be covered to count as outdoor.
Okay. So a patio of some sort with a seating of some sort.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So Barry, then that brings up a really good point since it's undefined. So it would be, I guess the question from what you just said is, would it be acceptable for us as a board to consider the actual cars
outdoor parking?
If that's the case, then we need to, then the code is, that seems to be the question. Is that right? Because if that's the case, we need some guidance from the city as to whether we can count the cars or not as dining space.
Because it is serving kind of a dual purpose.
Yeah, so I think we lack the definition of outdoor dining. We don't lack a definition of parking space. So it's very clear that if you're leaving a car in a space for any amount of time, then it counts against you as a parking space. We have to do that, of course, for other, not this type of situation usually, but other situations for like loading zones in different areas where people might argue these aren't parking, those types of things. So there is a definition for parking space, and we do think that all of these meet that.
But can I ask you this, though, Jackie, is do you have, there's going to be a fire code as far as how many people, et cetera, right? So how do they determine the fire code based on the building?
I believe so, yes.
And does that mean that can be on the property or within the building itself?
I don't know fire code that well, but my guess would be the building.
It is the building itself.
Right. The occupancy is based on the size of the building and the use.
Yeah, Barry would know better than I.
Yeah.
So then the reason I asked is, again, I think that Barry brings up a really valid question, which is, you know, these cars are by design by the business, been around for years, and our code just simply didn't address that issue. Is what it sounds like.
Yes. So I do think, I'm not sure if that's the point Ms. Clapper was making, but I do think it's a fair point, and we did think about that, but because they do seem to fall within the definition of parking space, we didn't think that they could be counted. You all could maybe use them as, you know, a unique characteristic, but that's not really the property, so that's something you'd have to talk about. But I do, and Ms. Clapper again can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of the question, the point also that you were making, Mr. Throckmorton, is couldn't there just be outdoor dining space added on this site, which has already been said is quite large, to meet the number of spaces that they want? That seems doable. There doesn't seem a reason they can't do that. They don't even have to cover it. So I think that was maybe more, or that's a point right. to make as well.
Right. So just a finer point for the newer commissioners, the third criteria is the most difficult one to meet, and that's what makes this petition kind of tough, because there needs to be something inherent in the piece of property that creates a practical difficulty. So even though our code, it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, Keegan and Jackie, even though our code doesn't really have specific allowance for this type of restaurant, the issue around the variance is tied to the piece of property. So they're kind of separate issues.
May I ask one question, Barry?
Sure.
Just for my understanding, to get 7 more spaces, how much larger, just as purely an exercise, how much larger would that outdoor dining patio space, uncovered space, need to be in order to get the 7 additional spaces that they desire?
I think it'd have to be at least, maybe Jackie can correct me, 1,200 square feet, 1,300 square feet, I think.
Additional or total?
Additional.
How much is what we're looking at, just for reference? What's that?
I believe that outdoor patio area is around 700 square feet. Maybe the petitioner can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I calculated.
Okay, so essentially it'd be about 1.5 times, somewhere in that area, larger. Okay, I was out of curiosity only. Thank you.
And I point out, I mean, I know everyone knows this, but just for, you know, that there's nothing here. So when you kind of look at this site plan and think, could they fit 1.5 times larger, you know, a space in this? Maybe not, but I mean, this could be designed in a different way so that they could have an ample, you know, that could be a draw. This Sonic, you know, has an interesting ample outside seating space. That could be done, even if looking at this desired site plan doesn't immediately render that to seem.
Well, I think a question could be to the petitioner. Mr. Stauffer, can you talk about the use of the rest of the property? Is it, I think there's some retention on the north side. Is that what I'm seeing? I'm sorry, that would be on the east side up there. Are there plans for other aspects? I think it's partially wooded, if I'm not mistaken. Or Keegan?
Yes, I'm not, I'll have to check what their current impervious surface coverage is at, but this is a detention pond on the north, and then there is some wooded area on the back end of the property.
And that's correct. And sorry, I was muted there. So yeah, the detention is there too. I guess that would be the east as I'm looking at this. There's currently woods to the rear of the property. And so again, theoretically, we could build, like I said, we could build the building larger. I don't know that doesn't serve any benefit other than to meet the code, and which is why we're asking for the relief here today.
Yes, Flavia.
Well, my question, this is definitely a different business model than what we are used to, a restaurant where people go drive in and sit down. Mm-hmm. I mean, exit the car, go inside. Of course, they have the drive-through option, but can the ordering area be, I mean, it seems like it fits the nomenclature of parking, but that's an ordering area. I wonder if, you know, they're getting penalized because of their business model. And I understand, I mean, and I'm very glad Joe asked the question about what it would take in terms of outdoor space. So I understand now why he said, why Mr. Stauffer said it wouldn't be feasible to put 1,200, another patio of 1,200 square feet. I mean, and add all that. I'm just wrestling with the idea that this is not really a parking area, that this is a eating area. You're just eating inside your car. And that's what I've been wrestling with here. I mean, they're not parking and going somewhere and staying there for long periods of time.
Could we hear a little bit more from staff about just that parking side of things, or sort of how that's defined in the code, just so that we can really get a clear read on that?
Yeah, I can pull up the definition of a vehicle parking space, but you know, maybe to touch on Flavia's point, the code doesn't really make a distinction between a parking space where you eat in the parking space and dine versus just where you park and get out. You know, so that's how we're looking at it as staff. I hope that answers your question, but I can look up the definition of a vehicle parking space if that would help.
So you all, just to be super clear, you guys, it's related to the fact that it is a vehicle. It doesn't make a difference. It is parked there. It doesn't make a difference what's happening inside of it.
Keegan, I can share it. Hold on just a second.
Oh, okay. But yes, that's correct. That's my understanding of that.
Yes, I think that is the department position, is that these are parking spaces, whether they're eating. I mean, you know, if we don't like, when we get a new McDonald's or something, you know, they don't, the parking spaces count whether people choose to sit in their vehicles and eat or not. I do understand that it's a different business model, but design wise, they function the same as parking spaces where someone gets out and goes in and gets the food. So, you know, the code is written this way with parking maximums, not to limit business, but to limit our impervious surface and our reliance on vehicles, and to encourage, you know, other types of development. We have seen, of course, here and in many places where they're overparked, and then, you know, what do we have? We have excess parking lots. And so the code is trying to avoid that. Similar to how we discussed when we've done some other restaurant variances. In this particular case, you know, we have seen nothing indicating that a store of this size, similar to this location, needs 27 parking spaces. You know, if this board was interested in thinking about the covered ordering spaces as something different than a typical parking space, I think we would still request that you would hold them to the standard of, you know, not just saying this is how many we need because I own a lot of stores, but showing us that, showing you that that this is a need, not a want. That's something we discussed on other projects. But as far as you know, the department is concerned, we just don't think the property, we don't think that holding this use to the code regulation presents a practical difficulty. One, the main reason is something that you touched on, is that the property is large. They could design it differently. They could add outdoor space to gain those extra spaces. They just don't want to, because that's not the model that they're used to doing. And our code requires that.
Any other questions?
This is Eric. I was just looking at, I'm still kind of stuck on the practical reality is, I think no matter how we vote, we don't solve any of those problems that the code is trying to address, because it doesn't say it can't be blacktopped. It doesn't, you know, I mean, literally we're creating a scenario where if he wanted 7 more spots, he's just going to blacktop off and he could just throw some picnic tables on some blacktop and say, you know, draw a yellow line around it and say, here's my extra 1,000 feet or 1,500 feet. And now I can have 700, I can have my 7 extra spots. And so I mean, it's where I'm struggling is the code wasn't designed to consider, you know, a Sonic style, car hop style. You know, I look up the drive-in window. Like, why are we not counting the drive-in window as a spot? If, you know, because these are essentially 13 drive-up windows that they have. You know, is the spots that, you know, you go to the drive-up window and then you zip over to this, you know, you have to go wait for your order. I mean, are those spots? You know, so that's kind of where I'm struggling on this is, and then confusingly in the drive-up window diagram, you have 13 cars conveniently parked in the drive-up line. And so when I was trying to figure out which spots are what, those particular 13 cars threw me for where I was like, which 13 are we talking about? What are we counting? So So I'm kind of struggling with, is this even a parking, like, you know, is it just a drive-up window or is it a parking lot? And the result, if we say yes or no, the result's almost the same. And that's kind of where I'm struggling.
And I think in response to that is, I think municipalities like Bloomington, and my understanding of what we're trying to do here.
Excuse me 1 second. I think this is just a question time, and we should hold our discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me position this as a question in the staff.
Okay.
Is it the responsibility of the board to work with petitioners so that they can design to the standards of the community, or is it our responsibility to change and provide variances so that we can conform to outside businesses' standard model of business? What's our purpose here in order to make a determination from our community, or for us to look at changing what we as a community have stated we wanted in order to please an outside business entity?
Right. So
how would the staff respond to that?
Yeah, I would say that the department's position is, our position is to guide development through the land use laws that the community has determined are appropriate, and that this board's position is to look at properties and determine whether or not they have unique characteristics that make those laws burdensome in a way that makes the use of those properties impossible or very difficult. So yes, it's our job to hold people to the rules of design. And then I would say it's the board's position, it's the board's job that when it can be shown that a property is so unique that it can't function within the rules of that code, that then you can provide relief so that the goals of the code are still met, so that the goals are still met, even if they can't be met by the letter of the law because of the practical difficulties presented by the lots.
Thank you.
And I would also say to Mr. Coyne, we have other restrictive regulations on the property, such as impervious surface, that again, we have determined through, council and the administration are appropriate, and also cap the, use of these lots. All of those things are supposed to work together. They don't, they're not always exactly at the same level of where the cap is. And sometimes we have to, sometimes we move, sometimes one keeps a property lower on development than the developer would like. And so meaning that if they did do outdoor dining here, would that be extra hard space? It might, yes, it probably would be if they can't fit it in, but they would only be allowed to do it if they could still meet their impervious surface coverage as well.
And at this point, the petition does not have any issues with impervious surface.
I don't believe so, no.
Flavia?
So of course, I understand why it was brought in front of us, because it's a unique business where people eat in the car. It's not a restaurant style per se, a traditional restaurant style. And it does affect the business if they don't have enough spots for people to stop and order their food, since they are ordering from their car and eating in their car. So would it be prudent for us to have a continuance and Mr. Stauffer come with relevant information or comparison to, since he has a lot of experience in this business, can he bring enough information to prove to us that this is important? Other than what we've been presented. Is there anything else that could make an argument in their favor?
Is that for staff, Flavia, or for the other members? For staff, I'll say for us, no, we don't think the property is unique. We think it's overparked. It's hard to say. I mean, if they showed similarly sized buildings, a mile and a half from a highway, if it was all very similar and they could show us, with parking counts that they're full at 35, you know, 7 days a week. I don't know. That's something that we'd have to talk to the director about. But we're just, with the size of the lot and the capabilities of being able to meet code, I just don't think we would be able to get there. But that doesn't mean you all wouldn't want to make that decision with that data.
A question for staff. So it seems to me that this type of business model will have difficulty being accommodated in any type of property like this. But could this property go into kind of like an outlot and a shopping, like a more of a shopping mall situation where there's more shared parking? I'm just thinking about the business model and not being able to meet our code, but it's the type of property that they're looking at a standalone piece of property here. Could you comment on that?
Sure. I could say, well, I'll say one thing and then Keegan, please do step in. We have had other restaurants, not exactly this business model, but, kind of fast food, fast casual. Like, for example, the Freddy's that is built on the west side, their particular lot is very small, but they're in a sea of existing parking. So they are able to offset what they're missing in those areas. It was interesting that you asked if we have a Sonic in town, because we don't, but we used to on South Walnut, and it's still there and it's vacant and it's just a huge empty parking lot with a tiny building on it, because we didn't have these parking restrictions and requirements when it was built. That, is obviously what we're trying to avoid with this code. But yes, if it was, I think there are other, design opportunities where any restaurant or any use could capitalize on shared parking other than on a solo lot like this.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, we are to the public. Is anybody here from public this evening who would like to comment on this petition? Please let us know by raising your hand or messaging in. See anything? Okay, I don't see anyone. Jackie? Keegan, nobody? Okay, then we are back to the petitioner, who I'm sure has plenty of time if they have further comments or thoughts they'd like to share at this point.
No, I appreciate your time. Like I said, I think at this point, if you wouldn't care to just go ahead and vote. Like I said, I do think that either way, we'll make the project go forward. It's just a matter of our business model does not specifically fit the intent of your code. And I'm a real estate developer in another business line, and nobody likes to see excess impervious area if you don't have to have it. I mean, that's the entire intent of your code. And so you're going to have, if you do not grant the variance, you're going to have the perverse result of having more impervious area here that's not necessary. So that I'll just leave you with that.
Thank you. Okay, so we are back to the commission for discussion and ultimately for action.
I'm going to put a motion on the table just to start, and then we can discuss, but I move denial of V-21-21.
Okay, do we have a second? I'll second it. Okay, so now we can discuss.
And I'll start since I made the motion. And the reason for the denial is, one, the petitioner said that they're going to move forward regardless. So that means that they can certainly work with us within the code. Second is, again, we're a unique community. We have a code here for a reason, that we're trying to build a certain type of community. What we're faced with here is a standardized business that's coming in, and this is their business model, and they're trying to first ask us, according to the petitioner, this is our business model. We'd like to work within that business model. Please give us 7 more spaces. That's at its core. And that's completely within their rights to ask to do that. Third, it's not our third or fourth point. It's not our responsibility to try to help or hinder a business in order to becoming competitive within their marketplace. That's not what we're here for. It's not about economics. It's about the code. And so all of those taken together, coupled with the fact that they could, with a redesign, get exactly what they want by simply working within the code. So really, it's something that I don't think that this board needs to get in the habit of, or even a one-off of granting a variance when there's a solution that doesn't require a variance, and there is a solution that doesn't require a variance. So with all of those reasons, that's why I'm saying that this just doesn't have any of the gravitas or any of the reasons for us to grant a variance based on what we're here to do in the first place as a board.
Thanks.
Thank you.
For me, the reason I decided to second that is the motion is because I don't see anything peculiar to this piece of property that would create the need for a variance. I do see that this business model does not fit well. Our code does not address this business model well, or in a way that would allow this business model to function on any piece of property, whether it's this or one block over. And so I just don't think that this rises to the criteria, the finding that there's something peculiar about this piece of property that would allow us to grant the variance, even if we are in agreement that our code does not really provide for this business model very well. Anybody else have anything to add? If not, we will.
Yeah, this is Eric.
Okay.
I do. I think, we're looking at practical difficulties purely from a petitioner standpoint. And I think there's some practical difficulties that will incur for the city as a reason if we deny this. And that's my concern. Is part of our goal is to reduce, you heard from the petitioner, we're going to create the reverse result that the code really wants, which is they're just going to asphalt off, they're just going to create more asphalt, and then we're going to have more outdoor seating so they can have more parking. And so I'm left with this, like, what about the practical difficulties from, what about the unintended consequences of this? Because it doesn't fit, there's an element for me that isn't about, what's the economics for the developer. I get it. This is cookie cutter. They just want to put the cookie cutter thing in and ask for the variance first. I understand that. But from a city perspective, the result that we'll be getting is more asphalt, not less asphalt. So I think as I look at the code and the goals of the code, why can't we take that into account when we're thinking about the variance? And so I think there's some, practical difficulties with the code that we're faced in this particular circumstance. And I think, there's something about that, it's why we exist, that we should be looking at as well.
I just want to respond to that, Eric, because I think that's an interesting take. But there's really specific language that is our criteria. That is, the practical difficulties are peculiar to the property in question. I would argue that this business model would have the same problem on any piece of property in Bloomington. So I just do not see, if it's not in a shared, parking scenario. So I just don't see how it meets this criteria. I agree with you that we very well may, end up with some unintended consequences in terms of meeting some other goals in the ultimate goals of the impervious surface coverage. But in terms of our purview, when reading what we're supposed to be kind of deciding on, that's kind of that's where I'm landing. And it's really bound up in that last criteria.
I'd also jump in to say, I think it's, I don't think that we can jump to the conclusion that we're going to have impervious coverage. What we're talking about is dining area space. It could be something that is not just blacktop that's placed on in a square. I mean, there are other options, and I think that they still have to fit within the code if they're going to expand that area. So I don't want to leap to I don't want to just accept the thought that it's going to be detrimental, you know, with a, you know, big 1,200 square feet more blacktop. I just don't think that that's where we should go to. But with that response, I want to support what Barry said. I think that's the issue, is that there is nothing in this petition that really gives us the latitude to grant a variance because it doesn't meet the standards. And that's really what we're here for. Whether we, you know, we are not here to fight, you know, with the city council and the code that they've come up with, that they work through. We have issues with it, and we're allowed to make those exceptions when there is a clear reason to do so. But I agree with Barry, at this point, there's just not.
You know what, Keegan, do you mind looking up, is there a definition of outdoor park, outdoor eating area, to see how that is defined in the code?
Sure. I was looking at it earlier.
There isn't. Okay. So really, there could be some pretty creative and interesting solutions from a design perspective that would allow more of, you know, if it's not necessarily tied to impervious surface, like it maybe doesn't even have to be on a patio. You know, there could be other things possibly that could be looked at. I don't know. I just throw that out there.
And I think, Barry, that's exactly, I think you've made the point really well, which is, you know, this is not something for us as a board to decide how they should design it. But what we're seeing here is that there is a clear path for the petitioner to get to the level of parking that they desire, working within the codes of the city. You know, we have codes, we have policies, you know, we have an idea of how we'd like our community to look. We don't want to have another Sonic like we do on the south side that sits empty with a lot of, you know, pave space. You know, again, I think you made a really valid point that there's just nothing here that says that we need to go around the code. Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Okay, so I think we are ready for a vote. So the motion again is to deny the petition with the findings as stated.
The denial. It was a straight denial, V-2121. There were no, I don't think there were any restrictions on it. My question though is, would the staff please remind us again what happens with a tied vote?
Yes. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
This is Mike Brooker, city attorney for the city. I can jump in on that. A 2-2 vote in this case would be a failed motion. So a 2-2 vote, the motion would not carry and you would continue debate.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, so with no further ado, we are ready for a roll call.
So a yes vote is for denial.
Correct, yes.
Coyne?
Yes.
Burrell?
Sorry, yes.
Throckmorton?
Yes.
Clapper?
Yes, okay.
4-0, thank you.
The petition is denied, and that was the only case on our docket this evening. So thank you all for your time. Have a good holiday.
Have a good evening.
See you in December. Bye-bye.